If it was a headline or a bumper sticker, it's have a positive sense of discontent always. What do I mean by that? Never get too high, never get too low. Steadiness with organizations is really critical. And so when you're really rocking, have a positive sense of discontent and be challenging your operating assumption. The question that I always ask people is, it's what I call the best question ever. If we're so good, why aren't we better?
Welcome back to The Long Game. I am the one and only, not in a good way, Josh Sparks. Today's episode is going to be very meaningful for me. In all the years I've been in business, I have never really had a mentor, someone who I could look up to and someone who I thought the world of, up until I met the guest who's on today. Steve Stagner became my executive chairman long before I knew what an executive chairman actually did. Right after my partnership with our current sponsors. He has led some incredible companies through a myriad of growth cycles, multiple economic environments, and in my opinion, has just this rare ability to see around corners somehow and stay grounded and in what actually matters. And so, to me, what makes Steve different isn't just kind of his experience, although he has a ton of it, but really it's his perspective on the world. I mean, our values couldn't be more aligned. He's helped me in my career think bigger, kind of slow down when it matters and really focus on stewardship and frankly, helping and thinking about building the next generation of leaders, which is very important for anybody. And so a lot of the leadership traits that I have today and successes that I have, I think trace back to the long conversations I've had the opportunity to have with Steve. And I'm just so grateful both for him in my life as a coach, but also as a friend. So, Steve, thank you for taking the time. You're a busy man for coming on my podcast.
Of course. And thank you for the nice words. And it goes both ways, Josh. I mean, meeting you and working with you has been such a life lesson for me and so meaningful. And I'm just so honored to work with you and your amazing team at IHS. It's I love the energy and the passion that you guys are generating, and what you're building is so incredible, and you're doing it for all the right reasons. You have the right values, and it's just an honor to always have time with you guys. So I appreciate you.
Well, of course, man. For maybe the 2 or 3 people in the world who don't know who you are, maybe just a quick background on yourself, and maybe get some context for the conversation.
My career, I guess, has spanned a couple of chapters. The first chapter was more in the retail world, where I started as an entrepreneur with one store and like $1,300. And that was a Mattress Firm store, and it was in retail, and ended up moving from the franchise to corporate and becoming the CEO and taking it from a couple hundred stores to over a couple thousand stores, and took it public, and was a public company CEO for 5 years. And then after that, the chapter was working with private equity, and where I had the fortune to work with a lot of platforms, from Alliance Animal Health, which is veterinarian clinics, to HVAC, to, of course, where we're at today with roofing, and now I work in an accounting roll up. And I think if I were just to summarize it all, I think my background has given me the ability to really appreciate the founders and the entrepreneurs, because I lived that life as a startup guy, and I have a lot of respect for that. But also, getting the gray hair of going through, the public company experience and a couple of private equity turns, and seeing it from different perspectives, has enabled me to really relate to the different stages of growth that you and your brand presidents are going through. And so, don't proclaim to have all the answers. Just have learned a lot through a lot of mistakes, and seen a few things, and try to share those in a very collaborative way with great leaders like yourself.
The first time I met you, Steve, it was actually, I was introduced to a CEO through the new partnership that I had become a part of, and you were the executive chairman. And he said, "Man, you got to meet this guy Stagner. You just got to get on a call with him." I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to kind of hear from someone who's been there, done that, as you like to say, seen this movie before." And we got on the call, and and during the call, I availed to you that in a couple of weeks, I was getting our original founding 9 brands together in Vegas. And you started poking me. You're like, oh, what are you doing? Like, how are you opening? Like, what do your breakout sessions look like? And I said, yeah, Steve, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out, man.
Yeah.
And you so graciously said, when is it? And I said, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You said, no, when exactly? And I told you the date. You're like, hey, would you mind if I'd be happy to come. I'm like, yeah, I want you to come, Steve. That 3-day seminar that we did, that you did. I mean, I sat as a bystander. I did not run that. You ran that. And that was such a cool experience for all 9 of our founders to get to see what a unified company looks like with great leadership. And we all walked away from that 3-day trip to Vegas feeling much more united as IHS. And I can't credit you enough for that. It was such a cool experience.
Yeah, thank you. And it was like you had 55 people, and it was daunting to prepare for that fast, but we did it, and I think something magical happened, during those days. I saw it live. I know you felt it. I know everyone felt it, but we really coalesced together with a vision, and people talk about like vision and mission and all that and values, and it's one thing to write them down and, put them as corporate speak and throw them around. But what happened when we left Vegas was 55 people, kind of had that passion in their fibers of their DNA that we were going to, accomplish this vision. And it was so energizing, and I think led to us partnering. So it was really cool. It was
Yeah, it
amazing.
was great. Yeah, it was awesome. So I'm asking about kind of businesses when they go through their different growth cycles, because you've been through a lot of this, and I like to think that growth stages aren't necessarily, and often aren't, tied necessarily to revenue. They're tied to complexity in an organization. So how do you think about leading through different evolutions and different cycles of growth in an organization? And I guess with that, like, where do you think IHS stands today?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way the typical life cycle of almost all businesses, from when I guess Bill Gates was in his garage, to Microsoft today, to Apple, to IHS, to Mattress Firm, and it usually starts, with this entrepreneur where the trust is in the entrepreneur, the maniac on a mission. And that's what people join. They get excited about this vision, and it's a scary phase because you're just trying to survive. But it's also a phase that you're really focused on cash costs and customers, and you make decisions really fast. And those are what we call really entrepreneurial led, organizations. And then at some point, to your point about complexity, as you start to figure out what works, you start to scale and you start to experience some success. And then you end up in this next stage, which is moving from kind of founder led to like leader led. And that's a precarious stage, which I think IHS, is kind of in the middle of and on the back end of. And it's a precarious stage because it's very fragile. It's almost like a no man's land in tennis. It's like, you're moving from the decisions are trusted in Josh, to now we have to trust in a system. And the trust moves from, the founder to migrating to the leaders. And it doesn't just automatically happen. So you have to think about, when you're in that scale, how do you align on the vision, mission, values, and non-negotiables, and then have an operating framework so that people will adhere to that. And honestly, the leaders have to have the permission and the protection to make some decisions because they're going to make mistakes like you did when you started, like I did when I started. And we need them to make those mistakes as long as they don't bet the company so that they can learn from those mistakes and they can shift the ownership over to those. So it's also very natural for the founder to autocorrect and to see things that aren't going. You and I've had hours of conversations on this topic, and it's hard to see. It's hard to see when things aren't going as you would do it. But at the end of the day, you have to think about, you want to create a sustainable, scalable, growing and learning and growing organization, not an organization that is reliant on one, so one human, because there's no way you can scale. And so what I think that IHS is IHS has had an incredible founder-led environment, and you're transitioning now to leader-led, brought in some new leadership team, and I think I think you're doing it very well, but it's a very precarious stage. And I think as you get on the back end of that, what's going to happen is you're able to scale at a much faster rate than what you could have done before, because the decisions are now closer to it. The people that are closer to it can make decisions. And candidly, when you're across, America and Canada, how are you going to make all those decisions so fast? And the only way to do that is to trust your people, your leaders.
Jocko Willing talks about the commander's intent, making sure that that is over communicated across the organization. I think it's something 90% of second generation businesses go under, and even more third generation businesses. And it probably speaks right to what you're saying, which is the business is architected, led, inspired, governed by the founder, and everybody follows that person. But how do you take that and translate that via playbooks, via what is it that you've seen in organizations that have successfully made that change, that turn? What was protected early, so that the growth wasn't diluted? What was it that made them successful?
It's really about a set of beliefs, and it's having core. You mentioned Jocko Willink's commander's intent. It's really about having a set of firm beliefs that you will not negotiate on. So what happens typically in an organization that struggles is when they move in the shift trust from the founder to the systems sometimes are created with one goal in mind, and that's efficiency. The problem with the systems is founders usually are one goal in mind, and that's client. And so when you shift from the client to the systems, you sometimes do dumb things because you're so focused on the systems. I call it like 1-800 customer service. Like they just can't see past the common sense of taking care of the client. And we've all had these experiences. I've had these experiences. I've shared them with your team, where you go somewhere and they can't make a decision because their policy says they can't do it. And policies are kind of like, to me, it's like the Constitution has amendments, and I think policies should have amendments, and you should have freedom to make decisions. Where companies and leaders make mistakes is around this commander's intent misunderstanding. That if the commander's intent is really clear, then you're giving the permission and protection for the lower level leaders, or the mid-level leaders, or the senior leaders, to make the decisions of doing what's right versus sometimes what they're told. And that is the subtle difference that we have to protect. That you must do what's right. And a crazy analogy that I think simplifies this, that I always think about, is when you're a pilot and you're flying at altitude at 20,000 feet, you have to have, oxygen. And if you don't have the oxygen for whatever reason, you can pass out and die. There are pilots who, if you're going to deviate off your course, you have to call air traffic control and get approval. If you lose oxygen, there has been pilots that have actually called to request for approval, and waiting on that approval, they've passed out and died and they killed their family. So I know that's an extreme example, and it's crazy, but in real life, what should happen is you should get down below the deck, get down below 13,000 immediately, and then beg for forgiveness, because living is really the commander's intent. The commander's intent is to live, and the rules are set up in place for a very good reason, so that we don't bump into each other when we're in the air. But there are times when leaders have to the pilot, meaning the man or woman in control, needs to make the decision, get down to altitude, get down to a safe altitude, and then call and say, "Hey, I had to deviate, sorry," and take whatever consequences. That is a hard thing to teach in an organization, because you really have to understand the commander's intent. But if you can get that, and it really comes down to you, Josh, and your leadership team on how you deal with mistakes. You have to really honor the mistakes, because you went through them yourself and you learned from things. And the better you are at dealing with mistakes and celebrating those mistakes, and what do I mean by that? It's learning from them. It's sharing them and say, what did we learn? What's the takeaways? Like in the military, after an op, you have to have like, what did we learn from that? What did we do right? What could we do differently? That's a celebration of a mistake. And what we're in the business of is continuous improvement.
Yeah, we talk commander's intent. I often talk to the team. I mean, every day. One of my favorite books is The Founder's Mentality. It talks about the insurgent mission. It talks about absolute customer obsession. And at the end of the day, we're a business that generates leads, that sells those leads, that produces high quality projects and gets referrals. That's kind of the Jim Collins flywheel of what our business is. And I've heard people say, as businesses scale, they lose their culture. They lose their ability to have that obsession with the customer. And frankly, I don't think that scale necessarily kills culture. I think that neglect to the culture does. And so I think one thing that we've spent a lot of time on doing was making sure that the decision making and the autonomy is held at the right level of the organization. And oftentimes we've seen organizations and read a lot, they bring in really smart IQ people to lead a bunch of field people, and they have no idea what it takes to actually move the needle in the field, and they centralize all that decision making, and that's, I think, when you lose the culture in an organization. So, Steve, when you think about leadership at scale, and you think about what a leader has to do as they grow in their career, from maybe being a project manager leading just some crews, to then being maybe a branch manager and then a brand manager, regional manager, as they scale, how does leadership look different as you continue to kind of up level in your career?
Well, to me, Josh, the function of the leader is to bring about change. However, it's the function of culture is usually to keep things the way they are, right? Because cultures are designed to just follow a management system. So it's no longer about just managing or making decisions. It's really about architecting momentum. And we're in an ever-changing environment. Think about all the disruptive changes that are happening in not only the planet, the world, but the macro environment, the industries, the private equity, the technology disruption. So we need to be change ready. As leaders, we need to develop a cadence of change management to where we look at the change as an adventure, not as a problem. It's a puzzle, not a problem. So what I say to people all the time is, when you hire people and you're talking to your people in your team, don't hire them. Enroll, enlist, and engage them in a journey, because a journey is an adventure. If I said, hey, we're going to go climb a mountain or we're going to go do something, yeah, it's going to be difficult. We're going to altitude. It's going to be hard. It's going to be cold. It's going to be all those things. And the people who sign up for that adventure are in for that adventure. But if you didn't want to go up a mountain, then it's work and it's painful and you don't want to do it. So don't hire people. I think the leader's role is to enroll, enlist, and engage people in this journey, so that when we tackle problems, we're tackling them with this spirit and this passion and this entrepreneurial insurgent mission, that you talk about in the founder's mentality of like, hey, we've got to go get this done. And this is exciting and it's a puzzle and we're going to go have fun with it. That's a very different culture than a culture of compliance. That's a culture of commitment. And compliance is what you pay for, but a commitment is a choice that humans make, and you can't force it. I can't tell you, Josh, you need to be more committed. Josh, you're the CEO, be more committed. How can that's not tangible. But if you choose to be committed, then what you do is you get excited about it, and then all the creativity happens, and then solutions and ideas are generated, and it's the most fun thing you've ever done. And you look back and it's not work. It's no matter what happens, it's just, and this because you built your company and it was so intoxicating and so energizing. And when you get that vibe, and that's what I felt with you guys, is this intoxicating, contagious energy and this contagious passion, then everyone wants to join. Oh, by the way, you sell roofs. Oh, by the way, I sold mattresses. Oh, by the way, we do accounting. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. Do you have the contagious passion to spread this journey of something bigger than your life? That the best companies in the world who capture that lightning in that bottle, that's what changes everything, because you can't buy passion.
No, you said that to me a lot. One thing you said repeatedly was hire and fire based on your values. And it's such a simple thing to say, a much harder thing to do, but hire and fire based on your values. And then early on, actually during that Vegas seminar, you shared that I think Ernest Shackleton's story about the endurance and about that help wanted ad posted. But do you think a big part of culture, it sounds like, is making sure that obviously that it's not just what you say in the all hands meeting, it's what people see rewarded and corrected, but also kind of how you hire. I mean, you've got to hire the right people, right?
Yeah, I think, to me, it's a couple things. It starts with your enrolling, listening, engaging, which is your hiring, phase, which don't just hire them and say, do you meet the qualifications? Sit down with them and go over your blueprint or your vision or your map and say, engage. Are you excited about this? Because if you're not a 10 on day one, you're not going to be a 10 on day 365. I mean, like you got to make sure they're like a 12. And then if they're pumped up about the vision, you'll go through everything. But the second thing is you said a word earlier about neglect. Think of a culture as a garden, and you got to tend to it, and you got to get your hands dirty. You got to get into the culture, and you got to live in the culture. And that's why I travel so much and get involved, is because you got to, correct things and touch things, because those weeds in that culture ultimately destroy your garden. And so you have to see them very quickly, and you've got to nurture your garden, provide sunlight, provide soil, provide fertilizer, provide all the things. You got to support your culture with growth, cause, and reward. Growth meaning, let me help you grow individually. Cause meaning, hey, we're doing something bigger than ourselves. And reward meaning, hey, we recognize you and we're paying you. And if all those things are fair, if that were a Venn diagram, then you achieve commitment, not compliance. And that's how I look at, when I think about culture, it's really starting with why humans actually go to work. And in my estimation, they go to work because they want to grow innately, like they want to be a part of something that teaches them and that they grow. Secondly, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And third, they want to be rewarded and recognized. And so if all those things line up, you achieve commitment, not just compliance. So be deliberate about it.
Yeah. So speaking to your analogy, how do you as an organization scale? Really easy to do when you have a core nucleus of people who just live and breathe your company colors. We used to call it bleeding blue at Infinity. We have blue logos and stuff, and bleeding IHS. It's like you're so bought and involved. And back to your analogy about the garden, you get weeds that pop up. What's the best weed killer? Because I imagine it's a lot of middle management as the company starts to grow. Is it being present? Is it town halls? Is it how do you continue to make sure that culture is instilled throughout the organization?
Well, it's interesting. When I was a young leader in like 1999, I got to meet with a gentleman who had 20,000 employees. And he gave me this analogy that I've never forgotten, which was because I asked him, I said, how do you lead 20,000 people? Because I was leading 200 at the time. and that seemed, it was your question. And he said, Steve, when you plant St. Augustine grass, you have to plant the squares, and then then you have to water the whole yard and tend to the weeds. When you plant zoysia grass, you plant plugs, and then you water the plugs, and the plugs suffocate the weeds. And so what he told me was, he said, what I do is I make sure that my regional leaders, my direct line leaders that report to me, and then their leaders all are bought in, enrolled, enlisted, engaged in our journey, and that they are the ones who suffocate the weeds. So that you create this culture stewardship down the line to where when you're not there, because you can't be, on the West Coast and in Florida and in, Wisconsin, all at the same time, you need the culture to know what is right and what is not culturally wrong. And you want a culture that will hold each other accountable at the lowest levels. And so it starts with conversations like, hey, that's not appropriate. That's not what we do here. That's not the commander's intent. And I'm going to hold you accountable for that and not wait for corporate to do that. And that's the only way you can have a scaled organization. Otherwise, it's impossible for you to be overseeing 10,000 people, which you'll be at overnight. And so you have to, so who do you invest your time? Water the plugs. You invest your time with starting with your regional leaders, and then they invest their time with the brand presidents, and then they invest their time with their service line leaders, And so what happens is at each level, they all have to be bought into the commander's intent and the mission. And then wherever you see weaknesses, where you can use data and you can use your eyes by visiting, when I would go out in the field and I would see something that was inconsistent with our vision and our mission, that's when you burrow down and you have to tend to that garden and get your hands dirty, get in those weeds, make the tough call, which we typically don't fast enough. Let go of the weed and get a new plug in there and go. And that's the best analogy I've ever heard. So
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. We do town halls quite a bit. We also have, next week we're going to Mexico. We have over 300 people coming for the IHS Awards trip, which is a pretty cool event where we celebrate all the successes throughout the year. That's a great cultural builder. Then we have a strategic leadership summit where we bring all the leaders of the organization together in person and spend a 3-day planning session with them. And so we really try to embed the reason that we exist, which is to rid the world of unscrupulous contractors, and what role they can play in making sure that's propagated well for years to come. Our goal is to build an enduring business. And speaking of enduring businesses, actually, maybe we could change the topic a little bit here. When I started back in '97, and even when the business started kicking off heavy in 2005. Had a little ad in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which is a little paper, for $125, and I would get 30 calls out of that one little ad, which is incredible. And in our industry, I would show up to an appointment on time, and they might have called 5 people, and I was the only person to show up. And it was incredible, right? Leads were pretty easy to get. Businesses were fairly easy to scale all through the tens. And when COVID hit, there was this kind of strong economic boom on the housing side, or at least the remodeling side, where everybody was sitting at home and wanted to rebuild their houses, wanted to freshen them up. The last couple of years have been tougher for our industry. The leads are a little bit harder to come by. There's more competition out there, competing for less leads, less customers. And you've led, obviously, Mattress Firm for a long time, and other organizations through different cycles in the economy, through different volatility. What was it that helped you succeed in the tougher times, and what did the businesses look like, maybe, and maybe what separates good leaders during those times from the average leaders?
I have some thoughts about that. Number one is, if it was a headline or a bumper sticker, it's have a positive sense of discontent always. What do I mean by that? Never get too high, never get too low. Steadiness with organizations is really critical. And so when you're really rocking the chapter you talked about, before it got tough, have a positive sense of discontent and be challenging your operating assumption. The question that I always ask people is, it's what I call the best question ever. If we're so good, why aren't we better? And the answer to that question, if we're so good, why aren't we better, is very revealing, so that you shore up disciplines for a storm. A storm is going to happen in every organization on the planet, no matter what. You're going to go through a downturn. So when you're going good, what happens is we get lazy. We get complacent. We get, kind of quote unquote fat and happy. And then we build infrastructure and we do all this, and we don't have that same insurgency that we had when we were building up. And then all of a sudden, times get bad and we're over bloated, expense structures and stuff like that. So we have to move, down very quickly. But if you're challenging your operating assumptions every year and saying, if we're so good, why aren't we better? Then you stay lean and mean all the way up. In the hard times, when you enter those, what I found is transparency is your biggest currency and your biggest confidence, and being very honest and very realistic about what is going on. And I remember when Mattress Firm was going through a bankruptcy, everyone was scared, and we had to do some restructuring, and, we had come off of, unbelievable years of growth. And now we're talking about our parent had fallen apart and we had to go through this bankruptcy. And I walked out to the team, 500 people at the corporate office, and told them reality of what I owned and what they own and what we all own, and said, and here's the path out. here's the path that this is what we need to focus on, but here's what we own. And let's not blame the external factors. Let's go do this. And we had a $300 million EBITDA improvement in 12 months after that, in the face of negative news and everything. And it was actually one of my best chapters ever. But it was a chapter of just honesty and directness, and just getting to the point. And I think that what people need, it's kind of like our children. They know what's going on. You just need to be honest with them, but you can't like ignore it and then not talk to them and have secret closed door meetings. Whenever you're in bad times, open your doors, bring them in, tell them what the problem is. A lot of people are scared to do that because well, they may leave. Well, you know what? They're going to leave anyways because they're thinking about it. Sit down with them and say, hey, look, we've got a challenge ahead of us. We can get out of this, have some hope. Shackleton is a dealer in hope, sell the hope, but at the same time, say, I need you to do this and I'll do this. And then the leader has to lead from the front and hop in. And if you do that, you can get through, I think, almost anything. But you can't run from it. Open your doors. Don't close your doors. I know these are very small things, but they're actually very big because everyone's talking. Yeah, I talk about MSU. In the absence of information, people are making shit up, and that's MSU. And so you gotta be very honest with everyone. And I would say if I only had one piece of advice to give leaders throughout their entire career, transparency is your best currency.
Yeah, that's very well said. I talk about building high performance teams, purpose, trust, and clarity. Having a reason to get out of bed in the morning, having a mission, being excited about it, building a trusting organization, which requires a lot of accountability and hiring the right people. But that clarity aspect of it is important. Would you say? And I think I did hear you say this, but clarity becomes more important than optimism when things are tight and when things are tough.
Yeah, I think optimism, cheerleading is good, but it can fall on deaf ears, if you're just, if you're not authentic. I think authenticity is really, really important. And what I found is just acknowledging reality is really, really critical. But then also having, a caged enthusiasm about what can happen and why it's so important for them and the people around them and all the lives that are at stake. I mean, think about all the families your organization feeds. And so that is a bigger why. I mean, sometimes we always think about what's the why. It's not necessarily just to grow EBITDA by 12% or whatever. It's the 2,000 direct lives that you have, plus the other indirect lives that are there that wake up every day and they're relying on us to be a going concern and to grow. And so if you don't go to bed passionate about that, I don't know what else to go to bed passionate about. Like that's a big burden. And I think we've got to care about them. And then all of the roofs that we put on people's houses, and then saving them from these unscrupulous contractors that are going to just, you have a mission that is very, very big. And so I think if you wake up and do that, what'll happen is it's actually quite simple. That passion and that energy will transfer to the clients, and the clients will tell more people about you. And then everyone wants to do more business. And that's what makes our economy work. And that's what makes your company work. And that's what pays for everything. It's that simple, but it's the same reason why you started in business from day one with Betsy. I mean, it's the reason why your mission statement is so important is because it is the ultimate answer to all questions. Like your mission statement is I don't think that there's a decision you couldn't have on the table inside IHS that if you just use that as the lens, that you couldn't make a good decision after that. Even your ERP system or whatever, does it help? Does it invoke trust? Does it, all the things that you're trying to do, every decision should be laddered up to that, I would say.
Well, Steve, so the podcast is called The Long Game, right? From the very beginning, thinking about what it takes to build an enduring company. We're trying to build something that's going to be around for 100 years, something that my kids could take a look at and 20 years from now and go, wow, look at what they did. Look at the impact they made in the industry and in the lives of all the employees. And so when you think about building something that lasts, building it for the long term, we've talked a lot about leadership today, but I've heard the term, talk about the term stewardship of a company. What does it look like as a leader to kind of prepare the business for long-term success well beyond yourself?
I mean, simply put, it's everything you touch, you want to make it stronger and healthier and more resilient than the way you found it. And if you were to think about your home or, any decision you make in the company, you can make these quick decisions and put temporary solutions up in your home to fix it. But if you had the mindset of 100-year mindset, what would you do differently? Like how would you think about it differently? And I think that you're a steward, I'm a steward, and this isn't about short-term profit. It's not about short-term decisions. It's really about how do we leave it so it's lasting and so that, whether we're doing a new ERP or a new website or so, how can we make decisions that are, you know, they may be more expensive, but they're going to be more durable. And if you've ever gone to other countries and seen, like in Germany, how they build homes, or in Italy, stuff that's up for 2,000 years, it's very, very much done with very workmanship type effort. Not slap it up really quickly. And in an organization, if you're going to build something to last, you need to build it around that stewardship to where it's like, and it is a tension between short-term performance and long-term kind of gain. And so that's the struggle that we all have. But so sometimes it's about making decisions of what can we say not now, we can't really put the investment in it to do it. So not now, we'll have to do it later, and focus on less, but do it better and more and deeper and more and more at the core. So that's what I think that you've got to think through as you're making these decisions, because you could do a million things, but you want to do the things that are going to last, and then they'll build on each other. But at the end of the day, that's what I would do is just talk to everyone about, we're not here to squeeze everything out of the business. We're here to build it so it's better than when we found it, and more durable and more long lasting. And look, you know, I can go back to 1996 and decisions that we were making all through the past 30 years of my life with that mindset. And I'm very happy to say I haven't been with Mattress Firm as an example for 9 years. And I still see evidence of those decisions that were made in the late 90s today all the time. And it makes me very proud, because I'm not there and other great leaders are leading it. But it's very it's very heartwarming that me and all the great leaders around me, made these decisions for the enduring time. And 30 years, 20 years, 10 years ago, they're lasting, and the business is going well. And I see that now at Alliance Animal, and I see that at other companies. I see it with you guys, and I just that's what I want to see is that we're just not trying to make as much money as we can as fast as we can. I think the money will come. The money will come. Yeah.
Well, you've played a huge role in a lot of those decisions and prioritization of those decisions that we've had. And it is interesting, my new CEO, Jay Teresi, likes to say, we all have enough ideas to break this business a million times. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
ideas aren't necessarily bad, but if you have too many of them competing for a spot in the room, sometimes the leadership team will get separated and you won't stay aligned. And so narrowing those priorities down to the things that actually move the needle and need to be done in order to focus on the outcome, which is the customer experience most of the time. I think that plays a key role. So
yeah, the older I get, Josh, I've just settled to we can only do three things, and I don't know and I could say that to everything in my life, at home, at work. It's just we can't have four. We can only do three. And if you sleep on that one and you think about it, and anytime you get over three things, you start asking yourself, are we really effective at it? What if we just did three things really well this year? Like unbelievably well. And then next year we did three things unbelievably well. Then we had six things done that were unbelievable, that were game changing, versus trying to focus on 20 this year and doing one decently well and 19 not so well. That's really, the older I get, the more I kind of get narrower. And you look at the football games and you listen to the coaches, and they always say there's three keys to victory. They never say there's five. You never see Nick Saban say there's 5 keys to victory in the championship this week. It's like, don't turn the ball over. convert on third downs, special teams, whatever, like whatever their deal is. It's never more than three. And I just think that we've always got to simplify. Jocko and Leif talk about that. Simplify, keep it simple, keep it simple. And because it's a very big operation, those guys, as you know, I mean, those guys were Navy SEALs in very complex environments, and they're talking about keep it simple, keep it simple. Let's not get too complicated here. And there's
Yeah,
a reason for
in our world, homeowners have leaky roofs. In their world, people die, and so
it. Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Keep it simple and take care of them. Take care of them, and that's what matters. So, anyways,
Steve, when you think about where IHS is today, what excites you most about where we're going? Because you've seen this movie, like you've
yeah,
seen companies at our
yeah.
scale, and you've seen where they could go. And what excites you about us?
I think you guys have an so when I think about like my experience in the mattress industry, when I got in it, it was an unscrupulous type industry. It was used car salesmen, and like it was like waterbed salesmen, and like a very shoddy retail experience. And I feel like we changed an industry. We birthed a national brand, and we changed an industry. Um, and we were a ragtag group, who did that. Like it was not what you think. Um, when I look at IHS, what I see is a group of unbelievable, passionate brand presidents that have just bought into your vision. And I think y'all are going to change an industry. I don't think the client experience is that great in your industry. It's not, it's very, it's one of those purchases. It's probably a grudge purchase, and they're not super excited about it. And then there's a lot of unscrupulous contractors that do shoddy work or overbill and all that. And I think you guys have an opportunity to do something special, to something that's their biggest investment in their life, most likely their home, and you have a chance to shore it up in a classy way. I think you can change the industry, and I think you are changing. I think you are changing the industry, and I think that people over time will start to recognize as you become border to border, coast to coast, and across now multiple countries. I think people should look at you as the standard, and I think you'll raise the bar. And I think that when you do that, the permission to play will not be like they can't play in your space if they don't live up to your standards, because the client will vote against them. And so when you get there, which I think you're getting there, you're going to set a bar. And if you think about it, I'm addicted to Starbucks, but Starbucks changes the bar, the mobile app and all the stuff that they do, it just changes the bar. You can't just open up and compete, that easily, because the bars change, and Amazon changed the bar, right? Now we can order everything and get it, instantly. You can change the bar. You and your team can change the bar. You can elevate the industry. And if that's not exciting, I don't know what is. I mean, that's like totally cool. From where you started, with Betsy, getting screwed, like, I mean, or Betty.
Like I
Was
say,
it Betty or Betsy? Yeah.
Betty, I've got 1,300 employees that have that same passion you do. I've got a bunch of leaders who are just so excited about what we're doing out there. I have the utmost belief in the fact that we are going to attain our mission, and
Yeah.
we're going to do it the right way. We're going to do it the scrupulous way, and we will impact the industry more so than we even are today. So, Steve, I know you are an incredibly busy man, and so thank you for taking some time out of your day to share your story with my podcast fellow guests here or listeners, and appreciate your friendship and your coaching over the years. It's been super influential to me, and I can't thank you enough, man. So appreciate your time.
Goes both ways. Love you guys. Love you, and y'all keep crushing it. So,
Yep.
here
you
for
too,
you
bro.
always. So take care.